Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May 24th finance meeting. This is the last finance meeting of the year. The meeting is being broadcast and recorded. In recent months, we've learned about the revenue side of the budget, followed by expenditures and granular detail. And today we're going to focus on the reserve fund, the strategy for savings, and get some updates on where we are with that and how we're earmarking some of the savings going forward, particularly with regard to some of the upcoming capital improvement projects. So, Vic, if you're ready to lead off, it's all yours.
Okay. We get the presentation up. I don't know, Steve, if you wanted to say anything beforehand before we start or no?
Dr. Ridke took care of it. It really is the scope of today's meeting is much more narrow than the last couple of meetings that we've had. So, as we go through today, we're really going to be focusing on fund balances and reserve accounts. So that's really the frame for today's session.
Okay. Yeah, as Dr. Rennie stated, Policy 620 requires on an annual basis as part of the budget process, the business manager or designee shall ensure that an item is included on a finance committee agenda for the finance committee to review the district's general fund commitments and reserve to determine whether they should be maintained, increased, or used for designated and authorized purposes, and any recommendations by the committee to modify the level of plan use of general fund commitments and reserves shall be presented to the full board for consideration. So I'm at LC 620 and having this meeting. So if we can go on to, so we're going to talk about the reserves, we'll talk about the fund balance, and we'll also talk about our capital reserve transfer. So we talk about reserves, we talk about our capital reserve fund. So this is a snapshot of our current capital reserve fund. You can see we have about just under $4.8 million as a balance, and we do have 4.1 million or so in approved uses. So there's everything from school bus replacements. We also have the Gladwin roof in there, and we have a small amount for a chiller project. We have to do the final testing on that for the $3,700. So that's already been committed. Those bids have been approved by the board, and we're just waiting on the buses. These buses, some are 18 months since we ordered them, so we're still waiting for them. Hope to get them before school starts. The other buses were ordered about 6 months ago, so hopefully we'll get them before the start of school also. So, we talk about delay in the supply chain and production. We're seeing that with school buses, so we're ordering them, several months or even years before we actually can get them. And they can see our remaining balance then is about a little over $600,000 after we complete those approved uses. So in the 23-24 budget, the current year, right now we're estimating based upon current projections about $2.9 million that will be transferred to the capital reserve fund. Again, we have two projects that were approved when we did the budget back in June of 23, is to complete the partial roof and restoration project at Penwood Elementary for the roof project, which is about $900,000 estimated, and also additional replacement buses. As our fleet keeps getting older, obviously we need to replace those buses. They don't last forever, but we're keeping buses generally about a decade or so. In most cases, not all. So we're maintaining those. And again, until we go out for bid for those projects, we don't know what the exact pricing is. So when we get the final scope and the pricing, we'll come back to the board at a facilities meeting to approve, that bid. And then the next slide is for the upcoming budget. We're estimating right now about 4.5 million. Again, that's what's estimated, and we're working on these numbers as we get to the June 10th meeting. So if anything changes, we'll let you know. But this is what we're estimating right now. We have a couple of chillers that we need to replace at the two high schools. Again, those high schools are 15 years or so. And we're getting to the end of those lives of those projects. The Ballacuma Middle School roof replacement. So this is 1.6 million is contingent upon the DCED grant that we were applying for this month. So again, that's contingent upon, that approval. We won't know that approval till September. So if that happens, great. If it doesn't, we'll have to make some adjustments with some other needs that we have. And then again, we have additional school buses that we need to replace. And again, all those projects, once you get the final scope and pricing of those, these numbers could change. And then as far as committed fund balance, so we have two areas that we have committed fund balance. One is the PSER stabilization fund. PSER is the public school employee retirement system. That's currently, we contribute 34% for every dollar that an employee earns. Next year it's going to be 33.9%. The projection going forward from 25-26 to the 31-32 year is about 34.72%, up to over 38%. So you can see, there's going to be an increase in that requirement obligation on the pension. So we have this 3.3 million to help stabilize the fund as increases happen over the next several years. And then the other one is future post-employee benefits. So under General Accounting Standard Board 75, we're required to have an actuary come in and do a valuation of our other post-employee benefits. And you can see the last report that we had was last summer. That was just about 9.8 million. We will get an updated report this year, this summer, and see what that liability is. Again, we record that on our books as a long-term liability, and we have committed fund balance to show that we do have the resources to pay for that long-term obligation, which is something that both the auditors or independent auditors like to see, and also Moody's, loves to see that too, that we have planned for this large liability on our books. So that always bodes well for the district. So right now we plan on keeping it at that level. If something changes, we will bring to the board a motion to change those commitments. But as of right now, we're planning on recommending to keep it at the same level for right now. And I think, Lynn, that's questions.
Well, thanks, Vic. That's helpful. So it looks like the general idea is the strategy going forward is to plan on saving or transferring to the reserve funds on the order of 1% of the total budget per year. Am I interpreting that about right?
Well, I don't know if it's 1%. I mean, obviously every year it depends upon, where we think the, financials are, with that. So right now, I mean, if you look at the 2.9 is slightly below, I guess. 1%.
Right. And then you said 4.5 for next year, which is slightly over.
It's slightly higher than that. So
Right.
it kind of depends upon
No, I get that, but
revenue and expenses, but generally around that.
Around
maybe
1%.
Obviously, if we could do more, it'd be great because we have a lot of projects, that we need to do to keep, our buildings in good shape and not deferring maintenance. When you defer maintenance, it actually costs you more, like in the long run. So we're trying to avoid that. So that's what we're trying to keep, Mr. Lill and the operations have their, projects and trying to keep everything, maintained to make sure that the buildings don't fall apart, but, have a lot of maintenance on it. Because again, that's going to cost you more and more money down the road. That leads to more debt. So now you're doing larger projects, and that's what we're trying to avoid that. And it costs you more money. When you borrow money, obviously you're paying interest. We're trying to avoid that. We think this is, the best way of doing it.
that's exactly where I was going with the question, because there are a couple of, as I understand it, some other very big roofing jobs on the horizon, which were not included in the list here. And the question was at this 1% plus minus savings rate per year, is that going to get us enough to hit those, or?
No, it won't.
Right.
It won't. We have, large building and projects. It's going to be something substantially more than that. unfortunately, as of right now, as we get further into the project and get, professionals in there to get to the project, but no, it won't.
Right. So,
That's an easy one.
no, I just wanted to get that documented. And so, where other school districts across the state, like, is there a range that's sort of standard, acceptable, normal for the amount that is appropriate for a school district to be saving? I mean, 1% seems reasonable, but is it certainly within standard to maybe do 2 or 3% if there's these big items on the horizon that are justifiable? How does that work?
So I think a lot of it, I don't think there's a standard out there, Mr. Ricky. I think it's, depending on what your financials are and what the financials are of the school district and what the needs are of the school district. I think it's so, I talk to other colleagues, they have long-term plans like we have. And some have shorter term because their buildings are rather new. Some have longer ones because their buildings are older. So it's really dependent upon, the school district, and you have committees that review them and try to develop like a plan. So I think it depends upon the school district.
Okay.
I do think though, Dr. Ricky, it would be worth the board's while, probably in the fall, to have PFM come in and talk to the board about the debt that the district has and how to structure potential future debt so that you can accelerate some of the projects. Mr. Orlando, we are debt free in what year?
It's 2035.
2035. So, looking at or having PFM come in and talk about the debt service payments between now and 2035 and what budgetary capacity there is to potentially do either a wraparound debt structure or some shorter or longer bonds that don't significantly increase your debt service payment. I think there will probably be a variety of options that the board would want to consider, especially for, what I would call critical path items, roofs, HVAC, and those types of issues.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, as you guys know, I don't like carrying around this $220 million of debt, and the idea of taking on more is particularly suboptimal. So that sounds great. Let's plan on that. I don't know. Carrie, is that something we could add to the fall?
Well, let me ask a few questions first, and then yes, I do think. So one of the things we've been talking about for a few years is what is the right amount of fund balance, and then how do we earmark it so it is transparent to the community about how much we're saving, how much we're putting in these reserves, and then how we're using it moving forward. And Vic, I feel like we started last year looking at this in the longer 10-year capital project scope. And I know it's hard to get out those 10 years, but getting out 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that then gives us the opportunity to understand how much do we have to save each year, and also how much we might have to take in debt on each year. So I guess the answer to your question, Todd, is yes, we need to do this, but I need to bounce back to Vic for a second and say, can we look at that scope and look at the estimates for those projects with contingency in there so we know they can go up or down, but really start saying, like, how would we, if we didn't want to take debt, what would the percentage going into capital reserves and committed funds, committed capital projects be? And then that really tells us, okay, this is how you can spread it out, but this is where you're not going to be able to do that. Is that kind of scope of project planning something that we're able to look into, and how far out can that scope go?
We can. I mean, we put together probably like a 5-year plan. Every updated all the time. Mr. Lil's on the phone, on the call. So we do look at that all the time with the ops staff. So we do have something like that we keep every year updating it, because things change, different needs happen, different years, sometimes can wait a couple of years, so we do look at that all the time. So yes, we do, we have that. We can put together something, we have something we can, look at that.
Because I think Jim, I think for the board, and the public, to be honest with you, I think it would be really helpful to look at that larger scope and say, here are all the projects coming down the line, and this is how we're gonna evolve through this scope, because as team members change, as board members change and stuff like that, the forest for the trees is something that's really helpful for the entire community on this project list. And it still feels, even though I know we've been doing it more and more since I started, it still feels like I don't have a full grasp on that, and would love to see that scope and even that end dollar sign. Like, hey, in the next 10 years, we're going to have to spend $30 million on capital projects, or $50 million, whatever that is. I think that is really helpful to see.
We
Yeah.
can actually put our capital projects plan up on Making Practices Public, because it
Perfect.
does lay out that cost. And Dr. Ridke asked if there was a standard. So there's no standard of how much money a district should be putting away. There are some different recommendations. There's a construction company, ICS, that I've worked with in the past that said that you should be looking at putting about 3% of your budget away every year for, saving for capital projects. For us to be able to do that, we would be cutting into programs that we have, right? Which is why, I never would want to recommend taking on more debt unless that was really the only path forward. I think given where our budget is now and where our expenses are now, that's why I'm recommending we bring PFM in, because in some of the years, the price tags are pretty significant for some of the work that needs to be done. And I think there's also extreme value in, typically when you build out a capital projects plan, there's a lot of clarity in 3 years. There's a little bit less clarity in 5 and beyond that. But even right now, with the way inflation is changing, it's really worth everyone's while to look at least annually at all of those projects, because there could be significant increases and decreases in cost. So that's going to be, and one of the plans that I'm putting together for the board and exit plan, one of my recommendations is for the operations department to look at those costs with contingencies at least once a year, to make sure that we're being as accurate as we possibly can.
And just one more question, Gina.
Oh,
Sorry.
there was a document that circulated. I don't know if it made it out on the public, but we had talked about it. And somehow I have about $50 million in my head over the next 10 years, largely driven by the high school roofs, I think, and a couple other things. Is that still the ballpark number that we're talking about?
So there is a capital projects plan that I don't know that we've made completely public yet. That was one of my goals this year, to put together for the board so we can make that. But I believe it was back in March, Jim, that we did an overview at the meeting.
Yeah,
we did.
Okay.
Correct. March 14th, 2024, facilities and purchasing. And that is an annual event. And if I may, just looking at that presentation, it does break things up into a short term, basically out until 2029, and also has a line item there for long term, which goes out to 2033. So that's it's kind of an overview, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful and we've talked about this in the budget meetings. I was at that meeting. It was really helpful. It's the first time we kind of got out that far. But I agree that an annual meeting is really important, but when we're not connecting the dots between these conversations and that document, I think people who miss that March meeting or don't have all the documents just can get a little lost, which is why I think it's really important to say, okay, here's the 10-year plan. Let's laser in on the 1-year plan or 2-year plan for this. I have one last question, Shayna. I promise I'll turn it over to you. So one statement, one question. I think we should do the PFM and Vic, if we can do that over the summer. I know that feels like that's blasphemy, but I think it would be really helpful to keep the momentum going. And back to your question, Todd, yeah, let's do it now and keep all this understanding. Because I feel like for at least me on the board, there's always like a learning curve drop. And it's like, I have to get my brain back in the budget mode to remember everything we talked about from the year before. But also, and I feel like this is a wrong memory, so Vic, please correct me. Don't we have an amount we should keep in the fund balance at all times to keep us at a certain level of district? What am I remembering around that there is a certain amount of money we have to be at the right level of a district? That's very vague.
Okay, I don't know. So 2 things. One is the way the law is, you can have more than 8% of your unassigned fund balance. So at the end of June 30, 23, we had a little over $2 million. Obviously, that's significantly less than 8%. So budget's sake of argument is $300 million, right? We have 2% in there right now. as of the audited statements at 6:30. So that's the one thing. For Moody's, there's different requirements for the trip. If you're talking about AAA bond rating, there's different
Yes.
fund balance level. I don't have it in front of me right now. We're substantially below what the allowable fund balance is for AAA bond.
Got it. And that is something I think maybe we talk about next time, because I just want to make sure the entire community and board is aware of like what that means and how it affects us.
And coincidentally, I got a call yesterday from Moody's asking me for information regarding that. So, they're watching, they have the financials, they're looking at it, they're analyzing, our ratings and so forth. So I'll have to have a conversation with them probably next week, regarding that. So, yeah, we're substantially below what they recommend, but we have strong financials, strong management controls, which kind of allows us to maintain that AAA rating right now. But we'll have a conversation with Moody's and see where that goes.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Because that puts us in jeopardy for could. So we should keep an eye on it and be aware of it. Let's be there. Okay, Shayna, I'll stop asking questions and you can go.
Oh, it's okay. I apologize for my voice. I was just hoping, Mr. Orlando, you could sort of give us a quick overview of how the Wolk settlement will affect our capital reserve and fund balance planning and saving and over the next couple of years and as that phases out, because I think that's important both for the board to understand really clearly and for the public to have a little more understanding of as well.
Okay, so at the June 10th meeting, there will be a motion that the board will have to approve the transfer amount out of the 23-24 budget. We have to list those projects. And I think we had the one slide right now. We have the Penwood roof and we have buses. If we are transferring 2.9 million, there will be a motion. Those funds will be transferred that month to the capital reserve. And then for the 24-25, as we have there, we indicated here's the amount and what the projects that we plan on using the funds for. And then obviously as things evolve, there could be other emergencies come up. We can potentially make changes between now and the end of the fiscal year for next year. Hope that answers your question.
Pretty much. I just was hoping that you could discuss the phase out and just like a quick couple sentences on how the settlement is working, just so that the public has an understanding of that side, because I think the public, when they think about that settlement, really what is in front of mind is the rebate checks that they've gotten. And so I think people don't necessarily understand how it affects the district budgeting.
So for the upcoming budget, there's a $4 million tax credit, and there next year's another $4 million tax credit. There may be some additional funds that will come this year because of some excess funds in there. So there'll be a tax credit on the bills. And then, as I think Dr. Yanni mentioned, back in January, we had the final audit. There's also a formula that we would have to go through. And when that is finalized after the audit, that will see if we're within the 2% variance under the stipulation. But we won't know that until we get done all the audit, which won't be till late 24, early 25.
And what year does it phase out?
It's 3 out of, so if you're in compliance below the 2%, it's 3 out of the 4 years.
Okay.
3 out of 4 years. So one year we comply with it. So out of the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay. And I'm not sure if I'm misremembering this. Does it limit our amount that we can have in fund balance in any way?
No.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Melanie, go for it.
Oops. Okay. Lowering hand. I just not really substantial questions. Most of the questions I had were already asked. But I'm just saying I wanted to say how much I appreciate how in putting this budget together this year, because it's kind of hard with so many variables happening with the changes at the district. And I guess next year we'll probably have a little bit better idea how everything's going to come out in the wash as far as all the new initiatives with full day K and the healthy start times and how that's going to affect the expense side of the budget. But the only thing that I really was for the community and just as a form is just like, what is PFM and what is their role in the district in their reviews?
Yeah, so Public Financial Management is a financial advisor firm that many school districts use, including Lower Marion, that helps with basically developing financial plans regarding our debt service and how to structure the debt that is most appropriate and at least impact on taxes. So basically, when we have a project, they have the debt portfolio. We look at that debt portfolio, see what that's going to take, potentially going to take on, and how we can structure that. And then basically, they'll come to public meetings. They've done this in the past, and they'll go through different options and come up with a recommendation, for the school that based upon the information that we provided to them. And again, that information changes. They can go back and do different scenarios. And I work closely with them, so we kind of look at the debt and the budget, and provide them information, regarding that. So we've done this in the past. We did the Black Rock Middle School project. They came in and gave a presentation. Here's our plan. We think we want to do. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and the market really dropped. So it was the time that we changed our plan because the rates were just like unbelievably low, and end up saving the district substantial amount of money. But things change in the world, and you have to pivot. And working with them, we were able to substantially reduce our debt service and the impact on our budget and taxes. So they're a very good firm. I know Dr. Yanni's dealt with them in other districts. They're very good, and we have a good relationship with them. So yeah, we can plan something. I'll just have to schedule what the date is so I can work with them on their schedule. Obviously, they have a lot of clients, and it takes some time to schedule everything and get the data together. So it's not something we can just do like in a week or two. It might take a few months for them to schedule and everything. So whether we do it this summer, possibly, but we'll have to see. That might be till the fall, just based upon their schedule and things of that nature. But that's who we've used with on this different debt service issues. And they've done a great job, I think, for us, and provided some very good advice over the years. So I would recommend continuing with them.
Thanks. Thank you. That sounds like an important service that we could use. Okay, that's it for my question. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll look forward to the June meeting when everything's laid out and presented. And thanks everyone for joining. And this will be the last finance meeting until next year. Take care, everyone.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.